Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here, and today I'm making this video to demonstrate the method that I use to clean the barrel of my precision rimfire rifles. This is perfect timing because I just got back from the MDT Summer Rumble Northern Rimfire Series matches. We had two 10-stage matches this past weekend, one on the Saturday and one on the Sunday. And here is one of the awards. This was from round 2. So on the Sunday, I was fortunate enough to shoot well enough to get second place. So this is one of the awards. I think these are awesome, like a giant 22 cartridge. I know some guys were laughing because they're kind of phallic shaped, but I think they're awesome and they look cool on the shelf. So with the two matches this past weekend, that was probably about 250 rounds through the rifle, and leading up to it the week before, I have an additional 200 rounds or so. So this perfect timing because that's about 450 rounds through the rifle since I last cleaned it. And I basically try and do this cleaning that I'm going to show in this video every 500 rounds or so. Realistically, the round count between cleaning does vary, anywhere between 300 and probably 600 rounds. But again, 500 is kind of the round count that I aim for before I clean it. I will also mention that this method I'm going to show in the video is something that I've adopted relatively recently, within the last 2,000 rounds or so. So that said, I've only done this 4 or 5 times, but it's worked really nicely. Essentially, what I really like about it is that it's surprisingly simple, not very time consuming. And I've been talking to some of the top shooters, rimfire shooters in my area, just when I see them at matches and such. So, you know, the top shooters that are consistently placing in the top 10 at my matches. And basically they're all doing something along these lines, somewhere in the same ballpark. So it's something I'm very comfortable adopting going forward. Anything can change. I change my mind all the time. So maybe in the future I'll change my mind. But for now, this has been working really nicely. And to kind of wrap it up in a nutshell, we're essentially just removing that carbon ring in the chamber and very lightly cleaning the bore and making sure that the crown is not all gunked up. That's basically all we're doing. It's very simple. The thing about cleaning rimfire barrels is you can ask 50 different shooters and you'll get 80 different ways of how to clean your rimfire barrel because it's such a hotly discussed topic. And I do want to reiterate or emphasize that this video is only going to be discussing cleaning the barrel. Cleaning the action and the bolt and everything is pretty self-explanatory, especially on a bolt gun. It's like any other mechanical device. Just make sure it's clean and lubricated properly and you're good to go. Cleaning the action and the bolt is more or less along the lines to make sure that it's functioning properly and reliably. Cleaning the bore and the chamber is a much more hotly debated topic because that will greatly affect your rifle's sort of consistency, performance, accuracy. And that's what we're going to be concentrating on in this video. So I know some guys, like the bench rest shooters are very particular in how they clean and when they clean, but maybe us purist style shooters are just more lazy or sloppy in these things. But I'm going to readjust the camera so you can get a better angle here. And I'll show you quickly also with the Borescope exactly what we're doing. Quickly before I start, just showing exactly what I use to clean my rimfire barrels. A bore guide, kind of a nice to have, not exactly a necessity, but I like to use the bore guide here, especially when I'm using either like the long cleaning rod here or the Borescope where there's enough length hanging off where it's easy to accidentally misalign things. It's, more for peace of mind to have a bore guide here. This one I purchased when I actually got the Voodoo originally. I believe it's made by Boretech, but Voodoo sells them. Obviously a cleaning rod. This one here is from Tipton. It's a carbon fiber rod with a brass tip, and I've had this thing for years and it works nicely. I also have a shorter cleaning rod here that I just made from one of those multi-section cleaning rods. I just took the front section, glued a wood handle to it, and I use this specifically because, again, I'm concentrating on removing that carbon ring from the chamber. This is just a lot easier to have control over without having 40 something inches of cleaning rod hanging off the back and misaligning things and having it to support the weight of the handle and everything. It's just easier to use a short little cleaning rod like this, but it's not necessary. I'm not worried that it's metal because I'm not pushing this thing all the way down the bore. Some appropriately sized jags. These are just the pointed jags that I like to use. Your patches and your preferred barrel cleaner or solvent. Now I used to use Rimfire Blend a lot on my rimfire rifles, especially when I used to strip the bore down completely. This stuff worked quite nicely. Now that I'm basically just focusing on the chamber and very lightly, basically just pushing the residual solvent down the board to lightly clean it, I've switched to C4 carbon remover, still from Borescope. They both work using the method that I'm about to show you. Just Rimfire blend, you have to soak it a little bit longer, and you get the same results with C4 just a little bit quicker. So this is kind of what I've switched to for now. And I also have these on the table just for demonstration purposes. I'm not going to use these today probably. Bore mops can be handy because they hold a lot more solvent, you know, they can soak it up better. I don't really use bore mops for my Rimfires anymore. These are for my 6.5, but some people like using them, so I thought I'd mention them, as well as brushes. Obviously, used to use brushes a lot, and I used to use brushes with this method of removing the carbon ring from the chamber, but I've actually found that if it's not a very stubborn carbon ring, you don't actually need to brush it, which is kind of nice. So we probably won't use these today, but obviously you can use them if you want. If it's a more stubborn carbon ring, you can just use a brush and you'll be fine. All right, let's run the Borescope into the chamber of the barrel so we can see exactly what's going on here. Now, I don't think a Borescope is completely necessary, and I actually don't use it every time I clean. I'll use it once in a while, and when I first started this cleaning method, I used it every single time for the first 2 or 3 times just to see what was going on exactly. But I'll start the Borescope camera here and record. Yeah, we are recording. So you can see I'm pushing the Borescope through the bore guide currently, and right there is the ejector, and right here is the entrance of the chamber. So now we're into the chamber, and right there is that carbon ring we're going to be focusing on. And this carbon ring, if I rotate the Borescope, you can see it's a fairly consistent sort of black ring of crud that forms inside the chamber of the barrel right before the rifling. So if I push the Borescope in just a little bit more, you can see right there, right here is where the rifling starts. And as I push the camera down the barrel, you can see the rifling here and all this crud and debris from shooting the match. Oh my gosh. Yeah, see, honestly, if you don't want to worry about your barrels, don't buy a Borescope, because you will have nightmares. The first couple of times you run a Borescope through your barrel, you'll be a bit shocked at the state of it. Now, I haven't run anything, no patches or anything through this barrel since the match, so all this debris is actually normal from what I've found after, you know, using your rifle normally. It looks scary, you know, people are gonna freak out, but honestly, this is just very normal for a Rimfire rifle. I don't know what these orange specks are. They're not rust, because I see them all the time right after I'm done shooting. So it might be, you know, part of the powder, unburnt powder and stuff. I don't know. This is what we're concentrating on right here. It's this carbon ring that we want to remove. And again, my current technique of cleaning a barrel is focusing on this carbon ring and basically leaving the barrel as is and just pushing the residual of that solvent will be pushed through the barrel and, you know, kind of wipe away all the gross debris and little speckles that you see. And the reason why we want to remove the carbon ring, and I'm going to explain this the best I can without making this a super long video, is the fact that that carbon ring is a buildup of not just carbon, it's lead and all this stuff. And the reason why it's detrimental to first round accuracy, aka it will give you cold bore shots, is because when it cools down, the carbon ring is a very hard material. So if your barrel is cold and it hasn't warmed up yet, that material will do weird things to the pressure of the round. The bullet will seat differently in the rifling, and it'll cause the first round or first couple of rounds of your group to go off in some random direction. So that's what people call a cold bore shot. And essentially you want to remove that so that you have as much consistency in the chamber as possible. But you don't want to strip the bore completely down all the time, because that lead and everything that's sort of microscopically filled in all the little voids and stuff to make your barrel nice and consistent is actually good fouling. So the bad fouling is basically the carbon ring. The good fouling is in your bore. It can build up enough fouling in the bore where you might occasionally need to strip it down to bare metal again. You know, we're talking for Rimfire, probably thousands of rounds. And that's why I'm focusing on the carbon ring in the chamber. So now, how do we remove the carbon ring from the chamber? Well, it's really quite straightforward. I'm going to use my little cleaning rod here, take a patch, and we're going to soak this. I like to put it onto the jag first, and then I'll soak it again with some C4, and I'm going to put probably 4 to 6 drops just to sort of saturate the, and we're going to run this saturated patch into the chamber, and we're just going to push it just deep enough so that it soaks where that carbon ring is. We're going to leave this in here for about 5 minutes or so. I find, again, if we do this every 500 rounds, it doesn't take very long. Just a couple minutes of soaking is fine, and I'll usually do this twice and the carbon ring will be completely gone. All right, so it's been soaking for about 5 minutes now, and at this point, this is where you could use a brush, and I used to use a brush. If you have a more stubborn carbon ring, or if it's been, 1,000 rounds or more, it might be a good idea to use a brush. You can pull the patch out. If you just pull straight back, the patch will actually come out with the jag, as you can see there. And you can just run a brush into the chamber, not too deep. You can see I have a piece of masking tape on this brush from when I used to use it, but I would push it in just until the masking tape is at the front of the chamber, and then you just rotate the brush to sort of scrub that carbon ring and then remove it back out. You can use this, but I've found that you don't really have to. So if I zoom in here, all I do is rotate the patch inside the chamber, and since it's been soaking with the C4, the carbon ring has sort of softened up and a lot of it will be removed. And again, I'll just repeat this process twice with another soaked patch, and checking with the Borescope, it will remove the carbon ring completely, again at this round count. And before, I thought rotating the rod like this was just rotating the jag and that the patch was probably not rotating, but if I pull the patch out just so it peeks out and I rotate it, hopefully you guys can see that, you can actually see that the patch is rotating. So I will just push this in until I feel a little bit of tension from the rifling, and I'll just rotate that just a couple times, just go around maybe a dozen times or so, and then I'll pull the patch back out. So we'll pull the patch back out now, and you can see, hopefully, that the patch has become sort of this carbon ring color because it's removing it, and that's exactly what we like to see. So obviously there's some residual solvent in the chamber right now because this thing was fully saturated, and what I'll do is I will grab my regular length cleaning rod and just run a patch straight through the barrel to push the residual carbon remover out of the bore, and at the same time remove all the sort of gross debris that we saw. And I'll just push a patch again down the barrel all the way down. I can actually feel it is a little bit damp with some of that solvent, so I didn't have to saturate that patch or anything, and I can just remove the cleaning rod. And at this point, I guess if you had a Borescope, you could Borescope it. Well, you know what? We can actually do that. Well, let's just Borescope it after one round to see how much of the carbon ring was removed. Generally, I just do this twice. I don't even bother Borescoping it because I found that that's been enough to remove it. So let's put the Borescope back into the chamber to see how much of the carbon ring has been removed after one round of that cleaning procedure. And you can see right there, you can already see the bare metal. So a lot of it has been removed. Actually, basically the whole thing. You can see some specks like right there of the carbon ring residual, but this is pretty good. So again, I don't usually Borescope it. I'll just run that process through twice. You can see the beginning of the rifling has been cleaned as well because I probably pushed and rotated the patch in a little bit too deep. That's okay. You'll have, a couple fouling rounds to foul up the beginning of the rifling again. And within 10 rounds, it'll settle in really quickly. If I push into the barrel here, you'll see right there, all the normal fouling is still in the rifling. and most of all the gunk and debris and chunks and stuff has been pushed through the barrel with that patch. So let's just do it again really quickly. And since we saw that it was mostly gone, I'll just start rotating it here after just a minute of soaking or so. So the second one isn't nearly as dirty. Obviously, the vast majority of the carbon ring was already removed. And once again, I will run another patch just down the bore to clean up some of the residual solvent and very, very lightly clean the barrel. And now after 2 passes, let's go back with the Borescope to check that carbon ring, see if it's gone. So here's the entrance of the chamber, and that's where the carbon ring was. And you can see it's all nice and shiny, ready to go, ready to perform without any cold bore shots, hopefully. And the rifling here, that again went a little bit too deep, but we will easily foul that up with a couple shots and we're good to go. So that's how I clean the chamber out of the carbon ring. Very straightforward. You can see there I just soaked it once and then went again with a wet patch. I didn't have to use a brush, although you totally can if you want. A nylon brush isn't going to hurt anything. If you have a stubborn ring or you just want to, do one pass quickly, you can use a brush for sure. But I just found it interesting that I can just rotate the patch and get the same results, which is awesome. The last thing I'm going to do here in terms of the barrel of the rifle is clean the muzzle or the crown of the barrel, which is very straightforward, and then we're basically done. Cleaning the crown of the barrel is obviously super straightforward. I already loosened this for the video, but you can take off any muzzle device you have. If you don't run a muzzle device, obviously this is even easier. But this is a tuna can barrel tuner. This is not a suppressor. Probably the #1 question on the channel. You can see there's no baffles inside. It's simply just a tuner. And you can simply just take some rag and a little bit of cleaner. You don't need much. You can simply just kind of apply some pressure, and I just like to rotate. Sorry, I'm trying to not get in the view of the camera, but I'll basically just rotate it like this. Bunch of stuff comes off, and it's clean. I'll do this a little bit better when I don't have the camera in the way. All right, so that's basically it. Again, just to wrap things up, remove the carbon ring, push out any sort of residual solvent down the bore, which also at the same time pushes all the little pieces of crud and stuff that you saw. Make sure you don't have some gunk buildup on the crown of your barrel, and you're basically good to go. I have found that this has helped tremendously for eliminating the cold bore shots that I was experiencing. Obviously, when you're done cleaning, make sure you put your cheek piece back and your bolt. Nothing worse than getting to the range and realizing you can't shoot because your bolt's on your workbench. But anyway, hopefully this answers some question. I know not everyone will agree with this method, which is totally fine. Again, do what works for you. This is what's working for me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Cheers.